to do Hook, that he felt that the
Steven Spielberg, I find quite confused in his recollection.
Steven Spielberg is widely considered one of Hollywood's most successful and beloved directors. He has created some of the most iconic films in cinema history and launched numerous careers. However, not every actor who worked with him came away with positive feelings. Behind the scenes, Spielberg is known for being methodical, demanding, maintaining strict control over his productions. This approach doesn't work for everyone, particularly actors who prefer more creative freedom or a collaborative working style. Some actors have quietly stepped away from working with Spielberg, while others have been more vocal about their disagreements. Here are 7 notable cases of actors who had difficult relationships with the legendary director and never returned to work with him again. Julia Roberts in The Hook. Controversy. Julia Roberts' experience on the set of Hook in 1991 became one of the most talked about Hollywood conflicts of the era. The film seemed perfect on paper, a live-action Peter Pan story directed by Spielberg and starring Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, and Roberts as Tinkerbell. However, the production was plagued with problems, many of which centered around Roberts. At the time, Roberts was going through personal difficulties. Her engagement had recently ended, and according to crew members, her emotional state affected her work on set. She frequently arrived late and seemed to isolate herself from the rest of the cast and crew. More significantly, she reportedly clashed with Spielberg's directing style, which emphasized tight scheduling, quick setups, and efficient execution. Roberts was known for being more spontaneous and emotional in her approach to acting, which didn't mesh well with Spielberg's structured method. Crew members described her as difficult to work with, though others suggested she was simply dealing with personal issues that made it hard to focus on work. Unfortunately, Spielberg runs his sets like a well-oiled machine and doesn't typically accommodate personal problems that interfere with production. The tension reached its peak when rumors circulated that Spielberg was considering replacing Roberts in the middle of filming. While he ultimately didn't follow through with this plan, the damage to their working relationship was already done. The atmosphere on set remained strained for the remainder of production years later. During a television interview, Spielberg was directly asked if he would ever work with Roberts again. After a long, uncomfortable pause, he simply said no without any further explanation. This single-word response spoke volumes about their relationship. For her part, Roberts has only made vague, polite comments about Spielberg in interviews, but the silence between them tells the real story. Once their professional relationship was damaged, neither party seemed interested in repairing it. Shia LaBeouf's public criticism. Shia LaBeouf's relationship with Spielberg started promisingly. After starring in the Transformers franchise, LaBeouf was cast in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which seemed like a passing of the torch moment. Spielberg publicly supported LaBeouf, calling him talented and giving him a prominent role in one of Hollywood's most beloved franchises. However, things went wrong after the film's release. Crystal Skull received lukewarm reviews from critics and fans, and instead of staying diplomatically quiet, LaBeouf chose to criticize the film publicly during press interviews. He admitted that he felt he had failed to live up to the legacy of the Indiana Jones character, and surprisingly, he placed some of the blame on Spielberg himself. LaBeouf stated that while actors, writers, and directors all share responsibility for a film's success or failure, he specifically felt that he couldn't make the material work despite his best efforts. This public criticism was seen as a major betrayal in Hollywood. Spielberg is known for protecting and supporting his actors, so having one of them publicly criticize both the film and his direction was deeply personal. Industry insiders reported that Spielberg felt blindsided by LaBeouf's comments, as it's considered highly unprofessional for actors to publicly blame directors for a film's shortcomings. LaBeouf later realized his mistake and publicly apologized, admitting that he had completely failed the people who loved and cherished the Indiana Jones legacy. He acknowledged that he had betrayed Spielberg's trust. However, by that point, the damage was irreversible. LaBeouf never appeared in another Spielberg film, not even in a small cameo role. In later interviews, LaBeouf described Spielberg as being more like a company than a person, someone who communicates through emails rather than having direct personal conversations. This comment revealed how their relationship had deteriorated from a promising collaboration to a cold, distant professional arrangement that ultimately ended completely. Richard Dreyfuss. The original muse Richard Dreyfuss held a special place in Spielberg's early career. He starred in two of Spielberg's most important films, Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. These movies weren't just successful. They essentially created the template for modern blockbuster filmmaking. Dreyfuss was at the center of both films, and his chemistry with Spielberg seemed perfect during those early years. However, after these collaborations ended, something changed in their relationship. Dreyfuss, who is known for speaking his mind and having strong opinions, began making subtle but pointed criticisms of Spielberg's directing style. He acknowledged that Spielberg is a great filmmaker, but made it clear that he doesn't consider him to be an actor's director. This was a significant criticism, suggesting that Spielberg prioritizes technical aspects and visual spectacle over the nuanced needs of his performers. Dreyfuss reportedly became frustrated with Spielberg's focus on the big-picture elements of filmmaking, feeling that the director often overlooked the subtle details of individual performances. Over time, he began distancing himself from Spielberg both professionally and in public statements. When asked about their relationship years later, Dreyfuss laughed and said they don't exchange Christmas cards, making it clear that their friendship had ended. What makes this situation particularly notable is that there was no dramatic public feud or scandal. Instead, their relationship simply dissolved quietly. Spielberg moved on to work with other actors, and Dreyfuss never appeared in another Spielberg film. What had begun as one of the most promising director-actor partnerships in Hollywood history simply faded away without resolution. Harrison Ford's professional distance. Harrison Ford's relationship with Spielberg is complicated because their collaboration on the Indiana Jones films was so successful. Raiders of the Lost Ark made Indiana Jones a cultural icon, so Ford's charismatic performance was essential to that success. However, behind the scenes, their relationship was characterized more by cold professionalism than genuine friendship. Ford is famously private and guarded, while Spielberg is known for his precise, detail-oriented approach to filmmaking. This combination created a respectful but rigid working dynamic. Ford reportedly grew frustrated with Spielberg's tendency to shoot dozens of takes of the same scene, feeling that after a certain point, the process became more about repetition than actual acting. Their relationship reached a breaking point. Due to an incident involving an unauthorized biography about Ford, Spielberg, apparently thinking it would be funny, distributed copies of the book to crew members on the Goonies set. Ford, who was already angry about the book's publication, felt mocked and humiliated by Spielberg's actions. According to sources, Ford confronted Spielberg about this incident in a private conversation that effectively ended their friendship. While neither man has publicly called it a feud, their relationship clearly changed after this incident. Public appearances together became rare, and even the later Indiana Jones films seemed to be made more out of professional obligation than genuine enthusiasm. When asked about Spielberg in interviews, Ford typically gives non-committal responses, like he's good at what he does. Statements that sound like praise but are actually quite distant and formal. Alec Baldwin's philosophical differences. Alec Baldwin never actually starred in a Spielberg film, but their failure to work together has become something of a Hollywood legend. In the early 1990s, when Baldwin was a rising star following his success in The Hunt for Red October, Spielberg was reportedly considering him for a leading role in one of his more serious dramas. However, when they met to discuss the project, things didn't go well. Baldwin expected to have a conversation about the role and the character, but instead, Spielberg immediately began laying out his detailed vision for every aspect of the performance. He described specific scenes, camera angles, and even how he wanted Baldwin to deliver certain lines. This approach didn't sit well with Baldwin, who is known for his strong personality and desire to have input into his characters. Baldwin reportedly felt that Spielberg was treating him like a chess piece rather than a creative collaborator. Prefers directors who allow actors to bring their own interpretation to roles, rather than having every detail predetermined. According to industry sources, Baldwin wasn't impressed with Spielberg's controlling approach, felt that it would stifle his creative process. While Baldwin has never publicly named Spielberg in his criticisms, he has spoken about directors who treat actors as mere instruments to execute their vision rather than as creative partners. When asked directly whether he would work with Spielberg, Baldwin gave a diplomatically worded but definitive answer, saying they have very different ideas about how the creative process should work. The fact that Baldwin, despite being a major star for decades, has never appeared in any Spielberg film, not even as a voice actor or in a cameo. It's notable in an industry where most A-list actors eventually work with the legendary director at least once. Jennifer Lawrence's impatience. Jennifer Lawrence is known for being direct and honest in her opinions, sometimes to a fault. She's not afraid to criticize directors or question scripts when she feels something isn't working. So when rumors began circulating about tension between her and Spielberg during a failed collaboration, it wasn't entirely surprising. The situation involved Spielberg's planned film It's What I Do, based on a memoir by war photographer Lindsay Addario. Lawrence was set to star in what seemed like a perfect prestige project that could have been a major awards contender. However, not long after the announcement, the project quietly disappeared, and no official explanation was ever given. Industry insiders suggested that Lawrence became frustrated with Spielberg's notoriously slow development process. Spielberg is known for juggling multiple projects simultaneously and often shelving films for years before returning to them. Lawrence, who was used to fast-paced production schedules, reportedly lost patience with the uncertainty and delays. There were also suggestions that Lawrence wanted more input into her character's development, while Spielberg preferred to maintain strict control over the script. He's known for having detailed, non-negotiable outlines for his films, and doesn't typically allow for improvisation or major changes during production. In a later interview, Lawrence made what seemed like a subtle reference to this situation, mentioning that sometimes a director's vision doesn't align with an actor's sense of urgency. While she didn't name Spielberg specifically, the timing of her comments suggested she was referring to their failed collaboration. Crispin Glover's ideological opposition. Crispin Glover represents a unique case because he never actually worked directly with Spielberg, but he became one of the director's most vocal critics anyway. Glover's issue was with Back to the Future, a film that Spielberg executive produced. In interviews, Glover didn't hold back his criticism of the film's moral message. Glover argued that Back to the Future essentially celebrates greed and materialism. He pointed out that the film's happy ending revolves around the family becoming wealthy, which he felt sent a problematic message about what constitutes success and happiness. For Glover, this wasn't just a minor flaw in the film. It represented everything wrong with mainstream Hollywood filmmaking. His criticism extended beyond just one film to what he saw as Spielberg's broader approach to storytelling. Glover accused major directors, including Spielberg, of prioritizing box office success over meaningful content. He felt that too many films were designed to comfort audiences rather than challenge them. To think critically about important issues, Glover continued to speak out against what he called corporate storytelling, arguing that when films become primarily about making money rather than creating art, they lose their cultural value. He believed that directors like Spielberg were more interested in delivering crowd-pleasing entertainment than in making films that would inspire genuine thought or social change. Spielberg never responded publicly to Glover's criticisms, maintaining his characteristic professional silence. However, the result was clear. Glover never appeared in any Spielberg film and was never even considered for roles in his projects. Some industry observers believe this was simply due to creative incompatibility, while others see it as an unofficial blacklisting. The price of creative control. These 7 cases illustrate different aspects of the challenges that can arise when working with a director as powerful and controlling as Steven Spielberg. While his methods have produced some of the most successful and beloved films in cinema history, they don't work for every actor. Some actors need more creative freedom than Spielberg typically allows. Others prefer a more collaborative approach, where they can have input into their character's development. Still others find his meticulous, detail-oriented style stifling to their creative process. Spielberg's approach to filmmaking is undeniably effective, but it requires actors who are willing to trust his vision completely and follow his direction without question. For actors who thrive on spontaneity, improvisation, or creative collaboration, his style can feel restrictive and unsatisfying. The common thread in all these stories is that once an actor crosses Spielberg or fails to fit into his working style, there's typically no second chance. He doesn't engage in public feuds or dramatic confrontations, but he also doesn't forget professional disappointments. As one industry observer noted, Spielberg doesn't slam doors, he simply doesn't open them again. These relationships demonstrate that even the most successful director-actor partnerships require mutual respect and compatible working styles. When those elements are missing, even the most promising collaborations can end permanently. In Hollywood, where relationships and reputation are everything, burning bridges with someone as influential as Spielberg can have lasting consequences. For an actor's career, the stories of these 7 actors serve as a reminder that creative success requires more than just talent. It also requires the ability to work well with others and adapt to different directing styles. For better or worse, Steven Spielberg's way of making films has produced extraordinary results, but it's not a method that works for everyone.